The United States Supreme Court is locked in a massive, high-stakes emergency showdown that could alter nationwide rules overnight. The Supreme Court has just stepped in and froze a ruling that was issued by the Fifth Circuit involving mail-in order medications and what rights certain states have under the recent Dobbs decision. This stay order issued by the Supreme Court opens back up a major political battle involving states' rights and that Supreme Court recent ruling in Dobbs. In two consolidated cases, the Fifth Circuit implemented a sweeping, nationwide restriction on medication commerce. Recognizing the high stakes of that lower court ruling by the Fifth Circuit, the Supreme Court issued a major emergency stay order. They froze that lower court's decision and blocked it from being implemented until the Fifth Circuit rules on this issue on the merits. But behind this emergency order is a deep division on the Supreme Court itself. We also had a very aggressive push by individual states on this issue, and also a very high-profile political issue that is making nationwide headlines. So we need to break down what exactly happened in this emergency battle, what this split on the Supreme Court in this order actually was, and what happens now moving forward. Now, before we jump into what the Supreme Court just did, if you like this type of content, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification icon to ensure you never miss this information when I release it. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. In my opinion, when it comes to self-defense protection, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to give you as much as possible as a member. They're always expanding upon their benefits, so if you want to check them out and learn more about them, you can do so clicking the links down below in the details section, also in the pinned comment. And right now, if you sign up using my exclusive code ARMSCHOLAR, you can get $50 off of the individual sign-up fee or $25 off of the family fee. Now, to understand why this emergency application is drawing some intense scrutiny and a lot of attention across the country, we have to look at the exact federal mechanics that are currently at play. This entire conflict exploded over the regulation of a specific medicine, a specific drug that is widely used for abortions. Now, back in 2021 and 2023, the FDA officially removed its long-standing in-person dispensing requirements, enabling this medication to be prescribed via telehealth, filled at a local retail pharmacy, and delivered directly to a resident's doorstep through U.S. mail. However, in response, the state of Louisiana, since they had passed some new laws, decided to enforce a strict ban on this medication within its own borders, and they filed a lawsuit under the Administrative Procedures Act. Louisiana argued that the FDA's mail-in order rules are completely arbitrary and capricious, claiming that out-of-state telehealth orders are directly undermining the state's sovereign power to regulate within its own borders. The legal question isn't just about the healthcare issue itself, it's a constitutional battle over federal preemption itself. And the question is, can a state use an administrative lawsuit to force a federal agency to undo a nationwide distribution rule in a new policy that it put in place? Now, this friction and this issue really reached a boiling point when a federal district court initially paused this case. Now, dissatisfied with that, Louisiana bypassed that pause and went straight to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, demanding an emergency order. In a very quick ruling, a 3-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit sided with the state of Louisiana and granted a sweeping injunction that completely rolled back the FDA's telehealth and mail-in order rules nationwide and also directly impacted the state's rules. This would instantly reinstate an in-person dispensing mandate across all 50 states, but also would directly impact the state of Louisiana. Now, the drug manufacturers in this case, of course, not liking that Fifth Circuit ruling, which made it a requirement to do this in person, they immediately went to the Supreme Court for an emergency appeal. And they warned that abruptly halting a multi-year distribution framework would unleash unprecedented chaos across the nation. Now, this is where this story and this case gets really interesting. Originally, Justice Alito issued a temporary short-term administrative stay to give the court time to review the briefs. But when the full Supreme Court officially voted, they decided to grant the formal stay pending appeal. And on this official order issued by the Supreme Court on the emergency basis, the Supreme Court bench actually fractured. Justice Alito and Thomas both fiercely dissented from the order granting this stay. In his dissent, Justice Alito slammed the majority, arguing that the drug manufacturers shouldn't get a pass on state regulations based on lost profits. This reveals that the highest court in the land really is fundamentally split on how to handle these types of sweeping administrative overrides. Now, for everyone watching this, we have to look past the specific pharmaceutical debate that's going on here, and really this exposes the massive constitutional engine driving this entire conflict. This is a high-stakes sequel to the Supreme Court's landmark decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Hole Women's Health, and this is really showing some of the fallout of that ruling. When the Supreme Court overrode Roe v. Wade in that Dobbs ruling, they explicitly stated that the authority to regulate or restrict abortion was being returned back to the people and their elected state representatives. But the ruling opened up a massive, unprecedented constitutional gray area that states like Louisiana are currently operating in. The legal question has transformed from a debate over state laws into an all-out jurisdictional war between individual state borders and now the federal government. Louisiana is essentially arguing that under the spirit of Dobbs, their state-level restrictions should allow them to block out-of-state entities from shipping items and this medication directly to their residents. This also brings in an issue of whether a circuit court like the Fifth Circuit can issue a sweeping ruling that would impact all states nationwide and modify a current FDA rule. Furthermore, this highlights the speed and chaos at which the Supreme Court's shadow docket currently operates. The fact that a nationwide commercial rule can completely be turned on and off over a single weekend via these rapid-fire emergency stay orders shows how quickly the legal landscape can actually change nationwide. The Supreme Court may have temporarily frozen the lower court's order, but by revealing this deep split with Thomas and Alito dissenting, the justices have actually signaled that the post-Dobbs battlefield right here is still very complex, and this may not be very straightforward going forward. The question now is, how would the court ultimately rule on this issue once it reaches them for full cert petition, full review, once the Fifth Circuit addresses this case? The Supreme Court's emergency stay here has temporarily blocked the Fifth Circuit's ruling and kept the mail order framework intact that the FDA has. But this is just kind of a strategic pause while the case heads back down to the Fifth Circuit for a full appellate review of this issue. And like I mentioned, this eventually will probably make its way back to the Supreme Court. Now, currently, the Fifth Circuit en banc panel has already set this case for expedited arguments after that Supreme Court order. The arguments are now set to take place on September 9th, which means after that, we could see this case reach the Supreme Court by early next term. But what this Supreme Court order shows us is that the Supreme Court, the High Court, is fundamentally divided, and we're looking at a profound struggle over the outer limits of the Supreme Court's recent ruling in Dobbs and how that needs to be applied. So that is the high-stakes reality behind the Supreme Court's emergency docket showdown that recently developed and that stay order that was issued by the Supreme Court. The stay is in place, but with Alito and Thomas dissenting, the wider battle over federal control is currently far from over. So I'm going to be tracking this as it develops more, as it moves through the lower court and likely eventually makes its way back to the Supreme Court. Now, if you like this type of content, if you want to ensure that you get updates on this video, on this topic and other topics going forward, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also turn on the notification icon to ensure you never miss these updates. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support, and never forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.